Hi everybody, Andrew Cuneo here with a new YouTube video. Today I'm going to be diving back into Alchemy. The latest Alchemy mini expansion has come out, the one that's attached to Neon Dynasty. And it hasn't been great, is what I would say about it. It's pretty imbalanced. There's a couple of black cards that are really strong, which if you're trying to play competitive Alchemy on the ladder, you're going to play against black decks a lot. And so I tried to make a blue-green deck that is intentionally made to fight against the black decks. And it's led to some pretty fun games. It's led to some pretty cool plays. And it's competitive with the black decks. I would say it's not beating the black decks enough that you really would necessarily want to choose it if you're trying to win. The metagame challenge is coming up this weekend. So I don't know that I would recommend it for that over a black deck, but it's at least close. Before we dive into this deck, let's look at why black has gotten so strong. So, well, for starters, this is a card that's existed, the City Stalker Connoisseur. We saw this a lot at the set championships. I would argue that this is probably the most powerful card in all of Alchemy. It's deceptively good. The fact that you're getting a solid body, you're almost always making your opponent discard their best card. Even if their hand is just a land, you get the land. You also get the blood tokens, so you get some value that you're going to be able to take advantage of as the game goes on. Just all around a really strong card. Probably the strongest card in Alchemy. So almost all of the black decks are going to be playing 4 copies of this card. Then there are some new cards that they got. They got Painful Bond, which this card is just, it's bizarre. Like, it just seems like it's way too good of a rate for a black card draw spell. I used this card in my last Tainted Pact video. This card seems like it's destined to be nerfed. It's really way too good. For people who've played Magic for a really long time, there was a period of time when this card, Necropotence, that is not even legal, or it's not on Arena. It's almost 30 years old at this point. Anyway, they printed this card, Necropotence, and for a long time, the designers of the game were like, "No, it's not overpowered. You guys are you're just not seeing it." And eventually, they were proven wrong. Necropotence is a completely ridiculous card. It's banned in Legacy. It's restricted in Vintage. And I feel like the designers of Painful Bond kind of forgot that lesson, that attaching some life loss to drawing of cards doesn't really necessarily balance it. It's like a 2-mana instant to draw 2 that maybe you're going to lose like between 0 and 3 life as the game goes on. This is not a balanced card. It's really good. It's part of the reason that black's incredibly popular. And then there's yet another one. This is another one of the latest cards, the Undercity Plunder. So this is kind of like a Mind Rod, but your opponent has the option of instead letting you get a card from their deck at random, which that sounds like would be a downside for this card, but because the way this card is worded, even if they have no cards or only one card in their hand, this is always going to replace itself with a card from your opponent's deck. So it doesn't have the problem that Mind Rots or Duresses have, where, eventually your opponent just gets to empty-handed and then you have a card in your deck that doesn't do anything. This card will always do something. So this is another quite strong card. And the combination of those 3 cards has led to kind of sometimes it's red-black, sometimes it's Grixis, sometimes it's blue-black. But you play against a black like more than half the time, and they always have some amount of a discard theme, is my experience. So that's going to lead us into why I built the deck, this blue-green deck, the way that I did. And I wanted to try to take advantage of Orvar, the All form. This is a card that has shown up some in like red-black sideboards for playing in the mirror. But I wanted to see what would happen if I just put them in my main deck. And I went even beyond that, and I said, I want to take advantage of the first sentence on this card. So before we dive into the first sentence, let me just make sure everyone understands why this card is good against black. It's because of the second sentence on the card, which says, when a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard this card, create a token that's a copy of target permanent. So they play a City Stalker Connoisseur. If you have Orvar in your hand, and Orvar is the most expensive card in your hand, you can discard it and have it come into play as your opponent's City Stalker Connoisseur. meaning you've kind of flipped the script on the trigger. So instead of them making you discard a good card, they've just put a good card into play for you, and now they have to discard the best card they have left in their hand. That's an incredibly powerful interaction. The interaction with Undercity Plunder is not quite as good, but you know, you're going to get to discard an Orvar and have it come to play as a land, or if you happen to have a good creature into play, you could do that. There's just a lot of possibilities with taking advantage of that discard trigger. But I wanted to say, okay, so I don't want a card in my deck that's just a 3/3 that I'm just planning to cast as a 4-mana 3/3 if I happen to not play against black, or I get in a spot where I'm not going to just hold this in my hand to wait for them to discard. So there's this other sentence on the card. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, if it targets one or more other permanents you control, create a token that's a copy of one of those permanents. So to me, this screams just fight spells. So I went and I looked, and there's this card, Decisive Denial, which is actually a pretty good card on rate that hasn't seen a ton of play. So it's, you either just play a fight spell, or you get to cast kind of a mini negate. You counter a 9-creature spell unless they pay 3. So that's just a generally good card on rate. And if you think about it with Orvar, you know, if you're doing a fight and you're using Decisive Denial and you've got an Orvar in play, you could wind up cloning one of your creatures. Now, unfortunately, the way I built my deck is that I do have a lot of legendary creatures in my deck. So it's not always going to just work out the way you want. But it comes up every once in a while. It's okay value, I would say. And then also to try to take it, to try to mitigate having all these Orvars in my main deck, I have Grizzled Huntmaster, which allows you to trade in the Orvars, or just any creature you don't want, for a creature from the sideboard. So we're going to have a bit of a toolbox in the sideboard. Also, when you do get to play the matchup against black and you think that they're probably going to City Stalker Connoisseur you, there's a 4th Orvar in the sideboard, which you can get with the Huntmaster. So in some ways, you have 7 shots at having an Orvar for when they City Stalker Connoisseur you on turn 4. So you're really, really trying to get that interaction to happen. And it's quite powerful when it does. I guess there's 2 other new cards in this deck. We've got the Boseiju Pathlighter. This is 3-mana 3/2 that you go and get a land. From the spellbook, you always get a land. I think that the spellbook is literally all lands. There might be 1 non-land. No, we got all lands. So it's just a variety of value lands. None of the lands are particularly great. The Mobilized District is maybe the best because it's a creature land. But there's also a Field of Ruin in here. There's Bonder's Enclave. So you're getting lands that you're going to get some minor value from the land. It's not insane, but it is just a 3-mana 3/2 that's a 3-mana 3/2 that gives you a 2-for-1. So that's solid. Other new card is this one, the Kami of Bamboo Grove. So this is a kind of a callback to Arboreal Grazer. It's green for a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, you put a land from your hand into the battlefield tap, so it can allow you to make 2 land drops on the first turn. Notably, it doesn't give you an extra land drop. It puts a land into play. So I've got Tangled Florahedrons in my deck. You cannot put those into play as a Tangled Veil off the Kami of Bamboo Groves. Also, if you have a Barkchannel Pathway, you cannot put it into play as the blue side because of how this card works. So there are some kind of gotchas to watch out for when you're playing with this card. But overall, it's a fairly powerful card. The second ability, Channel, and you get 2 forests also. You probably would want to do that in games where you're either concerned that you're going to miss your 4th land drop, so you don't really want to, play this on turn 1 and get your 2nd land into play, and then you're going to have your 3rd land, and then you're not going to have any lands after that. That's bad. You would want to channel this to get more lands, probably. Or just, anytime the game's going to go late and you feel like you can get value from having extra lands, you would just channel this. So it's got some flexibility. This is definitely a solid card. Then, to kind of round the deck out, I'm a huge fan of A-Esika's Chariot. I think it's a really underplayed card. I also think it's a card that happens to line up really great against black decks because they don't really have great ways to punish you for it. You're kind of always going to get like a 2-for-1 off of a black deck is my experience with this card. And sometimes they're going to just be hoping that you only get a 2-for-1. Sometimes it's just going to run away with the game. So 4 copies of that. Also, this card is really cool because Orvar makes tokens. So you can get tokens that you can copy with A-Esika's Chariot, which is pretty nice. Then we've got Wrenn and Sevens, which is kind of a package with the Chariot. We've got Rangers classes, which this is another card. This card isn't insane against the black decks, but it is pretty good because it is kind of a 2-for-1. They do play Invoke Despair, so they can get it off the board, but that's a spot where they're going to get the Ranger class and like the Wolf token or whatever your worst creature is. So you're kind of mitigating how bad the Invoke Despair is some of the time. Although other times it is annoying when they get your Ranger class. You would prefer not to have to sack it. Kind of works out either way there. And then what was the other thing I wanted to touch on? Oh, then we got this card, A-Alrund, which is not a new Alchemy card, but it was a card that was recently buffed. And it was buffed pretty substantially in Alchemy, so I wanted to try it out. And it's been pretty good. So the buff it's received is the backside, Haka, went from being a 2-3 to now being a 3-3, which that's a pretty substantial upgrade. And the front side used to only reveal the top 2 cards from your library, and now it reveals the top 3 cards of your library, so you're more likely to get a lot of value off of that trigger. So I've got 3 copies of that. I think it's a pretty good card now. It's looking for a home, I would say. Then rounding out the deck, we've kind of got the usual suspects of lands. I've got 12 dual lands, 2 creature lands, 2 value lands, and then remember there's the 4 Tangled Florahedrons. So the deck functionally has 27 land in it. And the way this deck plays, you're really hoping to ramp into an A-Esika's Chariot on turn 3, either with the Florahedron or with the Kami of Bamboo Groves. Those are your best draws. Moving on to the sideboard, remember that we've got a Grizzled Huntmaster based main deck, so we're going to have a lot of one-of creatures to get in the sideboard. So just kind of touching on those to start. We've got 1 Coma, which is the one kind of big finisher card you'd be getting. Oh, I guess one thing I wanted to... I don't know if I mentioned this or not. If you're trying to set up this thing with Orvar, where you're going to discard it to City Stalker Connoisseur, you have to have no cards in your deck that cost more than 4. Or no cards in your hand that cost more than 4. I do have a couple of cards that break that rule, Wrenn and Seven. I think it's just good enough you have to play it. A-Alrund breaks that rule too, although if you're trying to set it up, you can just play it as Haka and leave the Haka in play the turn you think you might get City Stalker Connoisseur. But anyway, that means that you don't have a ton of top end in the main deck because you're trying to make sure you can take advantage of this Orvar interaction. So you do want some top end in the sideboard to go get with the Huntmaster in a longer game. And that's where I've got 1 Coma, 1 Imrith. Just 2 good cards to search for. Then I've got a couple of other cards just for, various situations that might arise. Geist Pack Alpha. This is just generally when you're going to play the Huntmaster on turn 3 and you want to make sure you have a turn 4 play. Geist Pack Alpha is a pretty strong card. You can go and get that one. Also the Overcharged Amalgam. This card is, it's solid. Sometimes if you know you're in a matchup where you're going to want to, have a lot of counters, you can go and get the Amalgam off the Huntmaster. Also just generally a good card if you're kind of playing if you want to play more like a tempo deck. 4th copy of Orvar. I would say don't board this in if you're playing against a City Stalker Connoisseur deck. You specifically want it in the sideboard so it functions like copies 4 through 7 because of the Grizzled Huntmaster of the Orvar. Another Boseiju. This is just a card if you're stuck on lands and you have a Huntmaster, you would go get it. Also, I do board this in sometimes because the way that this deck functions, there are going to be lots of non-black matchups where Orvar is just an awful card and you want to get it out of your deck, and that's where you're going to board in some of the creature package. 1 Outland Liberator just to have a way to get rid of artifacts and enchantments. And then 2 Mind Flayers. There are 2 Mind Flayers specifically because I think that you want to be able to have one in your sideboard in a matchup where it's going to be really good. You want to be able to leave one in the sideboard to get with the Huntmaster, but it's such a strong card that you're also going to be able to want to have some of the board in. So I've got 1 to board in. That's a card I've been trying to figure out a way to make more room for in my sideboard. Then we've got a little bit of counters. 1 Negate, 1 Disdainful Stroke, 2 Annuls. This is just, the Annuls are basically in case you run into somebody who's still playing runes. The Disdainful Stroke and the Negate are pretty much against other blue decks. And then 1 Fading Hope. This is mostly in case you're playing against runes, but against a white weenie deck it would also be fine. So that's the deck. I hope you guys find it interesting at least, because I found this to be an interesting deck to play. Let's go ahead and played in some games and see if I can get some of those black matchups I was talking about. All right, I'm light on lands, but I do have 2 lands, but there's not really a lot of upside to this hand, right? If I don't draw my land, don't draw my 3rd land, I'm not doing anything. If I'm keeping this hand, I'm basically just gambling that Orvar is going to be a good card. I think I'm going to mulligan. I still have an Orvar. This is a much better hand, though. I think I'm going to pitch the Tamiyo's Safekeeping. I'm going to play this on, I guess, green on turn 1, and we'll see what I draw for the turn and what I scry into, because I want to try to set up a turn 3 Chariot if I can. And it looks like I'm going to be able to. I want a Pathlighter. I think I can do better than the Pathlighter. I'm going to play this on turn 2, and then if they kill it somehow in a way that's going to prevent me from playing the Chariot, I would just play the Haka on turn 3. So this is a blue and red deck, meaning that the Chariot's pretty unlikely to resolve this turn. Should I just play the Orvar instead? That seems kind of weak. I'll play the Chariot this turn. If it had gotten countered, I would have been able to play A-Alrund next turn. Not sure what my opponent's up to over there. Having no plays on turn 3 is unusual. Seagate Restoration. So they're either a control deck or they're maybe some kind of Delver deck. All right, they do have counters, but it's Essence Capture. Interesting. Seeker's Chariot is very good at dodging the Essence Capture. I think I'm not going to cast the Orvar this turn, so I'm just probably going to play the Lair of the Hydra. It's my only play, Aura. I'm going to recast the Seeker's Chariot. It's looking like what my turn is going to be. It's a good thing I didn't cast the Orvar to try to crew the Chariot. That would have been kind of a disastrous swing. Yeah, Seeker's Chariot remains a card that, if it's unanswered, just absolutely crushes the game. Alright, so this is one of the matchups where you definitely don't want to have a million Orvars in your deck. As we saw that game, I never even wanted to cast it. Probably don't need Fight Spell. It's kind of unclear exactly how my opponent is trying to win the game, but I'm going to assume that those counters at least are good. Probably Koma's a good card against their deck, but do I want Koma in my deck, or do I want to have it as my primary Huntmaster target? I think I'm just going to put the overcharged Amalgam in my deck, and then my Huntmaster targets are going to be like Koma, the Alpha, maybe the Pathlighter, maybe Imrith. This is another one of those cards that can be really, really punishing against blue decks. Put it on the mulligan, and I guess they're probably just straight blue-red. Maybe they're trying to use A-Alrund's Epiphany still? It's a mystery. Maybe we'll find out as this game goes on. It could also be a Smoldering Egg deck, which I think a Smoldering Egg deck would be pretty scary for my deck. Definitely excited to have the Pathlighter this turn, because it's going to mean I'm going to get to make my 4th land drop. Then maybe next turn, I do have 2-mana counters, so I might want to set up to just sit on the Ranger class. Get some value for my counters. We'll have to see what they do with their turn. Yet another expressive iteration. A little bit concerned that they're going to be able to kill all of my creatures pretty easily, so I don't think I want to sit on my counters. I think I'm going to want to just play the Chariot. I guess I do have... So I could rank this up, leave up... Now that I have Disdainful Stroke, I can even counter a Goldspan Dragon, potentially. And even if they kill my thing, next turn I could play the Pathlighter and still have all 3 counters up. I think I can actually afford to play this hand slow now. That's fine. These are both on blue. It'd be really nice if there was a color indicator. So the one thing that could have gone wrong here is they could have countered the Pathlighter and I would not have my 5th land, but I drew my 5th land this turn, which makes this play extremely safe. What do we want now? Oh, Colony Garden. Nice. I took the garden because it's going to give me a body that just goes into play to power up with Ranger class. Although I could have taken an untapped land that would have allowed me to play a 4-drop safely next turn. So maybe that was a mistake. That's right. It's an 0-1 plant, but I'm going to grow my plant. That is my plan. I can get blue mana from this. So I can still afford to cast my counters. They're just going to cost me 3 mana effectively. It's a good thing I took that Hall of Oracles. I think that's worth using one of my counters on. So if I play the Oddity this turn, I have a clear 2-turn clock. If I play the Chariot, it's probably a 2-turn clock too. Opponent was tired of sitting there waiting for me to figure out how I was going to beat them. I think I'm still going to play the Florahedron on turn 2, even though it doesn't look like it's necessarily going to be great. Maybe I'll have more information. Nah, not really. They're a white-black deck. This could be... There's a reanimation deck that people play that uses the white Invoke. This could be that. Or it could be a white-black Venture deck. Play a sad Huntmaster now. Playing the Florahedron really worked out badly. Impressively badly. Aww. Should have waited to do that until after I had attacked. They do have access to a mana. The A-Esika's Chariot experience is in full effect. Hopefully they don't have Meathook Massacre in their deck. I think if they don't have Meathook Massacre, I can probably win through whatever they might have going on. I think I'm going to hold this land because I'm going to name creature, so my guy will be... I guess I could play the land. My guy would still be a 3/3 to live through Precipitous Drop. Alright. Not bad, Alrund. Not bad at all. Ooh, that's going to be a hard one to beat. Is there anything in the spellbook that could help me? Probably not. I can cycle... Actually, I'm going to play an artifact next turn, so I could actually get full value off of that. Nice. So what are my good ways to interact with this? I have Otawara. I can attack through it. Don't have a great attack this turn because I would just be trading with their creatures. And they have the Liaisa. I think next turn I'm going to want to attack, though. Alright, I guess I'm not going to attack, or should I attack? I think I shouldn't. Know how I was supposed to win this game, but things definitely went bad somewhere. Okay. I wanted to bait the removal spell out of their hands so that I don't die. My plan is to play Haka and chump block. Hope to get another turn where I get to do something. I don't even know what it would be. Because I can attack for a lot of damage, but I can't attack for 21. Alright, that does it. I guess I'll leave Orvar in my deck to see if I can get to discard them. Probably I want like a Mind Flayer over a Haka. That is a mulligan. This hand seems better. Do I want Orvar this badly? I think no, I have to hope for a land. Also, my deck is not very good against Triumphant Adventure. If they played turn 2 Triumphant Adventure, I can't imagine I'm going to win this game. But there aren't really things I could draw that would change that fact. It should be pretty nice. This would, I want to just make land drops 4 and 5, definitely. There's the Triumphant Adventurer, sadly. Is it even worth attacking this turn? I think not, because I know that I'm going to use the... I'm just going to channel the Kami of Bamboo Groves this turn, and then play the Chariot. So I'm basically just... I think I'm going to get to attack with this for 3 damage and get my scry whenever I want. And it's really just an issue of, do I want it that turn? And I think the answer is no. Gone into the mines. Now they're killing Haka. I was wrong that I was going to get my scry whenever I want, but I'm not that sad that they used a treasure and a removal spell to kill Haka. Basically, I'm either going to win this game with the Chariot or not. So they're saying very loudly they have a removal spell for the Chariot. I guess I'm going to believe them. Question is... So that definitely mean I shouldn't block, and I think it does. Like, I'm gonna hope that they cast something that isn't a City Stalker Connoisseur. So I can get the Wrenn and Seven Chariot turn. Given that they didn't do that, I guess I'm gonna Decisive Denial the removal spell. Was it a bluff? Was it a bluff all along? Maybe it's just Precipitous Drop. Yeah. It was the Wandering Emperor. It's the Wandering Emperor all along. Gonna let this thing hit me one more time. But we're quickly approaching have to chump the Triumphant Adventurer every turn territory. They've gone into the Dungeon of the Mad Maze. Dungeon of the Mad Mage. No. Needed to have Orvar and not Wrenn and Seven in my hand. This one's really not looking good. If these cards were reversed, I might have actually had a chance to win. Sadly, now I'm done. Well, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys at least found it interesting. That, like I said at the beginning, this is probably not the best possible deck you can be playing in Alchemy. But realistically, you just have to be playing black in Alchemy now. There's no reason not to. Which is not really a good state for the format to be in. But one of the strengths of Alchemy is, in theory, they're going to fix it soon. So we got that to look forward to. If you haven't already, please sub to the channel because there will be more videos coming. Hopefully in a format where black is less overpowered. Thanks for watching.